let's talk about today's topic, Wi-Fi hotspots. And I'm going to lead this off with some really good trivia questions that Leah provided. So let's go through the first one, then we'll introduce Lee here and get going. So this first one, I got way wrong. Can you guys see the poll,
Yep.
Jim? Okay, excellent. I did not realize the year of this one. I don't want to lead on too much of this, but what year was the first hotspot brought to market? So give that a couple seconds. And again, Jim Lee, I got this one way wrong. I could have sworn that radio button in my iPhone to turn on a hotspot wasn't around very long, but it seems like I'm wrong. Lee, any color here you want to bring into this before I release the answer?
Well, I would say try to search your archives for when wireless Wi-Fi that is, actually came to be. That might help a little bit, maybe to eliminate one answer, but I will also admit that when I went searching for this, I too was surprised. That's all I'll say.
All right, well, I'm sharing those results. How did the audience do?
33% nailed it. 1996 predates Wi-Fi proper, which is credited for 1997-ish. The first one came out in 98, as per several sources, and then 2000, 2004. That's been there, done that by the time that got to those dates.
So that's really surprisingly. So that would have been a radio with probably an 802.11b Wi-Fi radio, and then what would it have for backhaul? Like
I have no idea, and I got extensive notes with the model on it and everything, and I can't find them because I'm sitting in a cleaned house and I didn't clean it. My wife isn't here, so I have an important pile of papers. I have no idea where the hell it is. And in those papers is the whole explanation for what the model was and everything.
Maybe it was one of those really early CDMA IP standards.
Yeah, I think it was a Nokia something, I think. I seem to remember that, but I apologize for not being able to give good depth.
If anyone knows that in the audience, go ahead and chat it in there for extra credit. In the meantime, let me launch this next one. I got this one wrong too. I had to Google it, so I cheated. So let me pull this up here and read it out to everybody. Which hospitality chain was fined by the FCC for using wireless LAN vendor-provided rogue containment against personal hotspots? I had to shorten that one. Yeah. Go ahead.
So this one I knew because it was such a kind of a maddening thing when it happened. I had to sort of read the release from FCC a few times to kind of try to make sense of it. So
yeah, I was so taken aback. I did an open letter to the FCC in the form of a blog. I contacted the then dissenting commissioner Ajit Pai, contacted him again when he became the head of the FCC, and reminded him that this issue was still out there and can you give us some clarity, and we'll talk about it. Absolutely right. We have the Marriott. The Marriott did get dinged, and I don't know how much time you want to take on this now. We'll talk about it a little bit later in the
Well, almost half the audience got that one right, so that's a good sign. So, Jim, why don't you take it away? We'll introduce Lee and the topic today and get it going.
Yeah, thanks, Don, and we're real happy to have Lee Badman with us again today for the Wednesday webinar. If you don't know Lee, he is a wireless network architect at a large higher education institution here in the United States. He is CWNE number 200, nice even number there. And he's a prolific blogger and writer. You can follow him at Network Computing and his personal blog, wirednot.wordpress.com, where somehow he makes wireless and the wireless industry really entertaining, funny, and interesting to read about, which is not always easy. So great to have you here, Lee. Are you ready?
I am, and thank you for your kind words, Jim. Yeah, this is a interesting topic. It's not new. It's not like it's something that just came up. And basically, personal hotspots are their own little islands within our enterprise networks. And just that being said, if you pause and think about it for a minute, little islands of somebody else's network inside of ours, your mind wants to go to a lot of places, and we'll talk about those places, or at least mine does, as somebody who's responsible for large networks. That's me. I'm a little bit of everywhere. Lately, it's a lot of time with pug dogs, working from home, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But so to get right to the reason why everybody's here, personal hotspots, I don't even want to define them yet. Just want to say that as we get into this, we will be talking about the technical, physics and networking and all of that, human behavior, things that people do. That's what I mean by culture, societal implications, if you will. You've already got a little bit of a taste of, Jim did a really good job explaining, what I just see as weirdness around the FCC and that whole Marriott thing, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. And again, this is nothing new. This has been kind of with us for a long time, but how we approach it and how we consider it, as network professionals is kind of evolved and been informed by the middle two bullets there. And again, we'll get into all of this. So hopefully we have some good discussion here and some good conversation at the end. So now a definition, what is a personal hotspot? Generally, we think about, I whip out my iPhone, I turn on the hotspot, or I get out my jetpack or whatever. On one side we've got Wi-Fi, however you deliver it, and on the other side we've got our cell backhaul to the internet. So whether it's a MiFi standalone device like on the left, or whether I do it from my cell phone on the right, or whether it's a cradle point device, kind of a wireless router, whatever. Basic construct: Wi-Fi on one side, cellular on the other. That's the basic construct. But I'm going to play a little bit fast and loose with hotspots, and I think we need to for a reason, and we'll get there. This is a snapshot of a you can see Cisco's prime infrastructure, their network management system. Over in the right, the arrow is pointing to an iPhone, and an iPhone hotspot putting out a rogue signal. So there's the first introduction of the word rogue. Doesn't matter if it's a wireless router, doesn't matter if it's a lot of things. Personal hotspots tend to fall under the category of rogues by the wireless monitoring system. And that becomes important because if you care about them, if you care about their presence, which many of us do for a number of reasons, and we'll talk about those reasons, you got to have some way of detecting them. And because you have the Wi-Fi on the one side, even if they're not connected to your network, they kind of fall under the generally accepted category of rogues. But this is where we get into, kind of some religious debates I've had with some gentlemen and women that I really respect. Some people have a far more open mind about what is a rogue. To some people, well, if it's a wireless device that you can absolutely prove is connected into your Ethernet network, that is a rogue. Anything else is not, and you just got to suck it up, buttercup. And I disagree with that. To me, within your own borders, if it's anything that broadcasts an SSID and it acts like an AP, that to me is a rogue. If it's within not only your own geography, but also within your scope of policy. So, I have my physical borders, and then I have a policy that says what's allowed, call it user, not EULA, but you get where I'm going. What users can do and can't do, policy. Those are also something that, the devices not only are within your borders, but are they impacted by your policy? That becomes an important question. And then is your policy even, would it stand up in court if you tried to call somebody out on it? And again, that's kind of its own thing that we'll get to. But so, stick with the topic of rogue for a minute, or the general idea of a rogue. We said hotspots are rogues, and I'm saying anything that broadcasts an SSID within my borders is a rogue, so that's certainly hotspots. But it can also be wireless routers, an infinite number of consumer devices that are in their setup mode, and maybe they have cell backhaul, maybe they have an Ethernet port, and maybe they have none of the above. But to me, if it's broadcasting an SSID, it's a rogue. Okay, so we're talking about hotspots, and we're talking a little bit beyond hotspots out of necessity, and it all comes down to how you detect them, your policies, and all of that. That's why I'm kind of stretching the concept a little, and hopefully I can make some sense of that nuance here in a little bit. So again, I'm saying it's basically something you did not install with my high quality drawing here. The Wi-Fi thing that just popped up, and it's within my borders, your borders, our borders. So hotspots are absolutely rogues. Rogues are usually covered by policy. Maybe that policy doesn't matter how you word it. It might be these are absolutely forbidden. It might be we would rather you did not, but basically chances are you don't just welcome all of this stuff into your network. So let's pause. Let's talk about the fact that a hotel wireless network is going to be a lot different than the a Wall Street financial serving wireless network is going to be a lot different than a factory floor production Wi-Fi network, right? There's going to be different tolerances for hotspots. There's going to be different policies. In the one case, it might be a nuisance. In another case, it might impact the bottom line and impact production and such. So, but generally, everybody has a policy. And then we're going to talk about how aggressively do you enforce the policy, et cetera. But basically, the concerns that go into caring about hotspots and caring about rogues, whether you take them together or treat them separately. You've got RF interference, right? We whip out the spectrum analyzer and try to find out what's creaming the network in this one area. It doesn't take a lot of explanation among wireless people to make that register as valid. Certainly security. You can plug in a wireless router into your Ethernet and make it an open network and extend the network out into the parking lot. That's the classic case of why you don't let people install their own wireless. You're extending the network so people can eavesdrop, that sort of thing. Again, talking rogues and hotspots here. I can take my hotspot, and I'll show you one example later, and just basically make I don't even want to call it an evil twin, just make a twin. I can just cause confusion. My network name on my hotspot is your network name. And all of a sudden you're getting help desk tickets that nobody can connect to me. It's like, nuisance kind of stuff. Depending on what you're using, you can create network loops. But to me, I've also found that if you tolerate hotspots, if you tolerate rogues too much, other people start piling on. And I'll talk about that a little bit too as we go. So basically all of this goes into the general bag of concerns for hotspots. On that notion of policy, it can be very hard to communicate it. And then if you can communicate it, if you can actually reach everybody, I won't even get into how do you do that. If I'm an employee and I have orientation, maybe I get I have to acknowledge all the things I won't do when I'm on the network at work. But if I'm a student, and especially if there's no captive portal or whatever to give me messaging, because everybody likes to whine and complain about captive portals. How do you get policy communicated to people? You mail it to them before they get there, hand them a piece of paper at the hotel desk that they don't read. Communicating is hard, but even if you can get the notion of policy across, it's up to people to follow it. So I have found, and all I can do is speak for me after 20 some odd years of doing all of this stuff. I didn't know I couldn't do that. Oh, sorry. Let me get that problem device shut down. I didn't know I couldn't do that. And I actually believe the vast majority of people who say that, and a lot of times it's just hard to communicate policy. So how could they know? And I mentioned, the different environments having their own realities, and how much they're going to be able to tolerate rogues depending on where you are. If you pop one up, it could be considered egregious enough to get you fired. And maybe that's an RF sensitivity thing, maybe it's a security concern, whatever. Go to a hotel and do it, you're not even going to get a slap on the wrist. Nobody is going to come knock on your door and tell you to turn off your hotspot, because everybody knows the hotel wireless sucks anyways. And one bad story about insecure public networks after another make a lot of us want to use our own hotspots anyways. It's very complicated. There is no one dimension to any of this. And like again, like in the hotel, you might get an opportunity to tell someone to go fly a kite. My hotspot, I'm using it, piss off. I pay my bill in the morning, leave me alone. So the impact of policy really depends on the environment that it covers. If we pivot to culture for a minute, think about how far we've come. Not only are cell phones ubiquitous, but I'm wondering how many among us listening do not have an unlimited data plan. And yes, I know that the telecom or the carriers have redefined unlimited to mean anything but. They do weird things to you when you top so many gigabit, et cetera. But basically, it's real easy to just cut loose and say, I've got my hotspot and I'm going to use it anywhere I want because I've got unlimited data. The whole notion of free guest Wi-Fi, everywhere I go, I look for the guest network so I don't use my own data. Arguably those days are coming to an end because the data plans are getting bigger and bigger, and because a lot of people just poorly implement guest Wi-Fi. And whereas it used to be something we all felt compelled to use because it's free, and free is good, and save money on our own phone bill and all of that. It just, those days are kind of morphing into being less important than they used to be. That paradigm being less important than it used to be. In my world, I find, doesn't matter, in the university setting, doesn't matter if it's students, visiting faculty, whatever. If I run into any problem with the network, out comes the hotspot. I can't do 802.1x on your network because I didn't read how to do it, and that is your fault, and I'm going to fire up my hotspot, and you can just deal with it because your network sucks because I didn't read the directions. I mean, this is the world that we're living in today, and it is so easy to get out that hotspot that I'm doing it. And then other people will say, well, if you had good guest wireless with no captive portal, they wouldn't do it. And my answer to that is, BS. People just are addicted to their hotspots. Doesn't matter how smooth you make the wireless guest service, you're still going to have people using their hotspot because nothing is easier than using what you're familiar with, and you're going to be familiar with your hotspot more so than anything else, and having to relearn a new guest network anywhere or everywhere you go. So. And then we also get pounded on the security message. We know that the world is getting ever more hostile. You know, one of the things we're warned about is open public Wi-Fi networks, and you know that's another cultural aspect to driving us to use our personal hotspots. And I have heard that last phrase more times than I can count, going from memory. This is my internet. Okay, I understand, but we need to have a little talk. No, this is my internet, and that's what people cling to, and some of it is generational, but it's also not going anywhere. So the culture about hotspots is absolutely changing. So, you know, now let's get into some of the problems with hotspots. Again, they're not going anywhere. This is here to stay. It's not like we're going to really eliminate anything by the end of this discussion. There will be no solution to the problem, but let's at least talk about, you know, why these things are problems. Anybody who's very familiar with wireless, who does wireless for a living, you know, the top 3 bullets, I don't need to explain the various interferences. You know, what happens when you put your own 40 meg, 2.4 gig channel width hotspot on top of my 20 meg channels. We're going to have problems, especially when they're poor channel choices. The whole notion of, well, you know, you should be able to give me an unused channel, and I'm going to be able to put my hotspot on that, or whatever my offending rogue is. Yeah, just give me an unused channel. I'm wondering if any of you have ever been asked for an unused channel, and if you actually have one to give beyond like 165 or something along those lines in a dense environment. For me, there is no such thing. I don't have an unused channel to give you. A lot of these devices are just flamethrowers, and they're made to just come on with zero intervention from the user. You know, maybe you can change the network name, and a lot of people never do, but you know, certainly they don't have any power, you know, slider or anything to turn down the power. And for some reason, when it comes to wireless, the unknowing among us, you know, more power is better. It's going to work better if I have lots and lots of power. So everything gets cranked up to the max anyways. And once the beast is unleashed, there's just no controlling it. And it's been unleashed for years. You know, Wi-Fi is just so compelling, built into everything, right? The tragedy of the commons, hopefully everybody knows what that is. It just works so well in the unlicensed bands. You know, let's just dump every weird device in there, and it's all just going to be wonderful and spectacular until it all steps on each other, and you know, the physics of it all just turns into a giant ball of RF yarn that you and I get to sort out. So, is every hotspot situation a crisis? Well, certainly not. You know, I can look in some environments and it's pretty clear that, you know, somebody is doing maintenance on an ATM or something and they use their hotspot to do that. Right now, I know of one retail environment that their annual inventory, an outside company comes in and they use a couple of hotspots, and that's how they tunnel back and, you know, do their inventory. You know, whether the impact of the previous slides worth of stuff is felt or not, sometimes people notice, sometimes they don't. It all depends on what's going on. I've also seen auditoriums where, for whatever reason, 4 people all have a hotspot on 157. And the AP, 2 of the APs in this giant auditorium are either using 157 or something close to where a couple of the 40 gig or 40 meg wide channels of the hotspots are being impacted. And all of a sudden there's a lot of trouble tickets. So it all depends on the particulars. You know, we know why people use hotspots. We know what the impact of hotspots can be, but whether a given hotspot will be a problem all depends on the particulars of the situation. This is not, you know, news to anybody. But if you get multiple hotspots, just like if you get too much Bluetooth that's doing the wrong thing in a given area, goes right back to the physics. Very unpredictable. So we turn to Mr. Depends. Is every hotspot situation a crisis? It all depends. Hey, Sam. If anybody doesn't know, that's Sam Clements, and friend of mine. Good to see you, Sam. And Sam is very fond of pointing out all the different ways that wireless stuff depends situationally. So that's just, again, we're not going to solve any problems here. That's kind of a little bit of the general, the what, the why, etc. How we've come to be at this point. So let's see what a little bit of it looks like. This is off of a Cisco controller, and this is not a hotspot, but it's one of those AP-like devices. Second column is the AP name. Where you see WATS, that's the name of a building, but after the WATS are room numbers. Those are room numbers that APs are in. So all of those APs in this building, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 APs are hearing family room TV on channel 1. And then if you jump over to the right-hand side and take a look at the signal strength, these are numbers that will cause interference. And again, get a couple of these, a few of these. This is a dorm, by the way. Get a few of these stepping on each other and stepping on, the company Wi-Fi, and you're going to have degraded performance. Will it be noticed? Maybe. Sooner or later, it will be. You can only go so far with doing this kind of stuff and having it all step on each other, as we all know. Here's one. This is a Verizon hotspot that somebody decided to name, the real SSID. And again, look at the signal strength over there. It's basically sitting right on top of an AP. The second one down is just basically being absolutely creamed. And so this is one that had to be dealt with. This was actually, I think this might have been the one that was actually leading to trouble tickets. Part of it is the name. You can suck in other people that are trying to connect to the wrong version of an SSID. That's whether you call that security or just a nuisance, there's something there that needs to be addressed, however you frame it. And I think this one also had at least another hotspot also nearby. And then this was one of those where the backstory is too long. Basically, user error on using the network the right way, therefore hotspots get pulled out at the drop of a hat. Here we have, and again, just to show you how prevalent this is, hotspots are becoming. This is a branch location in New York City, 1 week's worth of just hotspots named iPhone. So the SSID is iPhone. It's not a complete list shown, but basically, there was 56 different BSSIDs, all calling themselves iPhone, heard by the APs in this one branch location. And you can see that they're on channels 1, 6, 11, and 149 in this particular situation. This isn't saying that none of those 56 might have actually been causing problems, or half of them could have been. We have no way of knowing just from this view. But the bottom line is, in a week, there was 56 BSSIDs just called iPhone. There was also, a couple hundred more with different vehicle names zipping by the building, and then all kinds of other ones. This is just iPhone. This isn't iPhone X. Mary's second iPhone. There were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other ones within this 1 week where I pulled out just the 56 called iPhone. And the point is, these things are so common and so prevalent, and they're just there, and it's only getting more I don't want to say worse, but it's getting to be more and more and more in volume. Here we have an example of, this is the American Red Cross. I found that everywhere they go to do their blood drives, they bring 3 to 6 hotspots. They're usually not set up particularly well. A lot of times their own hotspots are stepping on each other. And at one point I tried to call them for a couple of reasons. I tried to ask, A, is there any way in heck that we can try to coordinate on some channels when you come into our environment? And B, do you realize that your own channels are just all over the place and you're stepping on each other? You're stepping on your own equipment. And the person I talked to was not technical. They had no technical people. All they knew is that, this is how they do stuff, and I could get nowhere in the dialogue. So it became something that we just live with. But the point here is that they're using dual band hotspots, whatever their equipment is. So it's not just a 2.4 gig thing. This is a little video, if I can figure out how to trigger it. You will see, come on. Sorry about that. I'm going to have to take manual control to figure out how to trigger that. So this is, the backdrop is I'm sorry for my ignorance, I'm using a different machine than I normally do. So the backdrop, the SSIDs you see in the background, that's the dense corporate network. Most of them are alpha dog, if you can read that. Again, dense environment, 2.4 gig, showing that side of it. When I hit the play button, you're going to see a Motorola cell phone hotspot pop up. The name will be Ajax Plumbing. There's no way to control the channel that it comes up on. There's no way, it just doesn't have any ability to do power control or channel control. So let's see what happens when that Motorola hotspot is enabled. Watch around channels 3 and 4. I'll give you the hint. And boom, there comes Ajax Plumbing. And it looks like it decided it was going to be really loud, and it's going to step on our channels 1 and 6 by positioning itself in the neighborhood of channel 3 and 4. It's like, what are you doing? Who designs these algorithms? It's like, why are we doing this? But it just is what it is. We're kind of stuck with it. Oh, okay, there it is. The control popped up. Let's see that again. Or not. All right, so how do I advance? Come on. All right, sorry about that. Here we have over in 5 gig, we can see a 40 meg channel popped up, the same wireless hotspot, what it's doing in 5 gig. So here we're on 149 and 153. Why isn't it just using 20? And it just plopped itself right down on top of the dense business network, unfortunately, when it came to life. So kind of back to what Jim was saying in the beginning there, the whole FCC stuff. We see now that the wireless monitoring systems consider these things hotspots. Can't we just contain them? Everybody gives you the ability to do deauthentication frames and or do deauths and disassociation frames and all of that. Why don't we just contain them? Our policy says you shouldn't use them. We don't want them there. We're just going to boot you. Well, back to the trivia question. The FCC has levied pretty significant fines, and it wasn't just at Marriott. There was another one right on the heels of Marriott that got dinged for, pretty good 6-figure amounts for using the very tools that the wireless manufacturers, the wireless vendors give you to mitigate rogues. It's like, well, why are they allowed to sell them? If you dig through the FCC's literature, sometimes these systems are considered jammers. Jammers are illegal to sell by the FCC's own regulatory framework. You cannot sell jammers. These things are jamming, according to some of the FCC. Well, it's really not. It's just a certain frame type. They call that frame type jamming. The whole thing is very confusing. And then, you know, there's implications of, well, if you're trying to jam people to get them to move to your guest network that costs money, you can't do that. Okay, well, what if we want to jam them, and I'm using the term loosely, to get them the hell off of our RF so that our voice over IP phones work? Well, you really shouldn't be doing that with anybody. This is all in unlicensed space. Well, why are those tools in there? Yeah, I got to get to a meeting. I mean, it's all very murky, weird. I know you can't click on that link, so if you come back and look at this, the open letter I wrote to the FCC, a lot of good discussion. Even if you don't believe my line of thinking on it, there's really good spirited discussion at the end of that blog. And that gets us to the end. And I was hoping that we would have time for questions and conversation, because this is a kind of a lively topic. So Sable wants to know if you would like to discuss anything.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. And we do have some good questions coming in, so we'll spend a few minutes on those. I share a lot of the same concerns about the Marriott decision. To me, RF jamming is a layer 1 function where you transmit a signal at 100% duty cycle and prevent another signal from being received. What happens at the MAC layer has nothing to do with that. So I don't like deauthentication attacks that are, malicious, but I think we need specific rules that are clear in what's allowed and what's not, and well defined, and not kind of new sort of interpretations of words that don't fit the way we use them in the real world. But that's just my take there.
No, I agree. I mean, I agree even to the point where if somebody's going to get fined for using the tools that are in these, the monitoring systems, take them out. Don't even sell them. Don't let
They're
people
all
sell them.
FCC approved access points that are doing the so-called jamming. So
yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, a lot to sort out. Okay, so questions around rogues. So Don has a good question. So are countermeasures defendable if an AP is connected to the private network? What do you think, Lee?
I would think that was, you go way back to the genesis of, rogue concerns. And in the beginning, I think early on, the main thing was, somebody put a router on my Ethernet network. And I think I think back then these tools were made for that situation, and therefore it would be defensible. But at the same time, who knows? I mean, I really have no idea if any of it is defensible anymore. The whole thing is, well, I do know that you don't have to allow somebody to plug a device into your network, right? That, that just kind of seems like common sense. You don't have to let somebody come in and plug into an Ethernet jack. But if they do, and now they're broadcasting, are you within your rights to, I'll just keep saying jamming because it's easier to say. Are you allowed to jam them? Well, how do you know they're on your network? How do you prove it? And if you know that you're on your network, go unplug the device. Why would you do the wireless thing if you can absolutely say with 100% certainty that is on my LAN? Well, if it's on your LAN, go take it off your LAN. Shut down the port. Do something other than the wireless thing that nobody knows if you can really do or not legally. That's my take on it. Maybe I'm missing a dimension to the question, but that's how I see that one.
No, I agree. And if you're brave enough, you can have your infrastructure automatically turn those switch ports off.
Yeah.
Be careful with that. Question from Tom. He says, how can I find hotspots on my network? Well, I think, you saw Lee show you some examples of finding them with APs. You can also use the channel scan results in 7SIGNAL Mobile Eye and Sapphire Eye to see them in real time and historically. So you can look there as well. Couple comments here from Chris Lee, who he says, well, I'll paraphrase. He doesn't like calling rogues that are not connected to his network or hotspots in that state as rogues. And the reason is, you might see hundreds or thousands of those and just get desensitized. And then when you have a real true rogue, as he puts it, you may end up ignoring it.
I don't disagree, but the only thing I would say on that is some of it is depending on how accustomed you are to looking for these things. A lot of times you'll see, I gave you the iPhone example. Not only will it be called iPhone or Jill's iPhone or Moto blah blah blah. A lot of them are or Verizon, MiFi, and then a whole bunch of goofy characters. A lot of them are obviously hotspots. There's absolutely no missing them. And you have no choice. I mean, I guess you can, if your monitoring system is sophisticated enough, you can say, don't alert on these if you truly don't want to know about them and leave everything else, left. But at the same time, if you spend a lot of time looking for these and at them, it kind of becomes, at least I don't lump them all into one category and say, there's nothing I can do about any of those. But you kind of develop the ability to just kind of skip past the ones that are hotspots and zoom in on the ones that are more potentially interesting. And then so there's that. And then just a quick note on the previous question about how do you find them. A lot of times too, I found that especially on like Macs, just the simple notion of, what other networks do you see? Like if you're dealing with a client and you suspect that there might be a interfering rogue in the neighborhood, if you can just, ask that of the client, what is it that you're seeing? Do you see any networks that don't belong there? And how strong do they appear? You know what I mean? Take a screenshot of what you're seeing and send that to me. A lot of times the low-tech methodology can bring you some value too, if you can get that information out of the client.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. Maybe one last question here, Don, and we'll wrap it up. So Nathan says, in an academic institution, how do you deal with rogues beyond policy? How do you hunt these down and deal with them?
Jesus, there's a lot of tricks, and I don't want to give them all away. But as an administrator on a big network, if you have access to multiple databases, sometimes if you can find a client connected to the rogue, you take that client MAC and say, has that client MAC ever been on the legitimate network? And if they have they been tied to an 802.1x characteristic, username, something that tells you who they are? And that is a lot of times how we'll find things that shouldn't be popped up in classrooms, things that shouldn't be. That actually, there's more nuance to it, but that actually gets me to within probably 80%, finding 80% of everything out there. If you can put all the pieces together, a lot of times you got to go back to syslog six months back or something. But if you know what you're looking for and you have the ability to correlate client information, client on rogue versus has this client been on the real network, that can be very empowering. And a lot of times the naming also gives it away. People love to name things after themselves, sometimes first and last name, which also makes it pretty easy to figure out who the heck they are. For what it's worth.
All right, thanks, Lee. I think, Don, that about wraps it up.
Excellent. Well, thank you both. Lee, thanks for joining us today. We love having you here. We'll definitely have you back. I think that this webinar wins the award for most questions. They keep coming in, and I know we haven't had a chance to get to all of them, but we will follow up with you post webinar. For those of you who have account managers here at 7SIGNAL, we'll certainly get back to you on those answers to your questions. Thank you very much for joining me today, and Jim and Lee, and we'll see you all next week. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you all then. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Lee. Thanks, Don.